you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Welcome to Truth and Justice with Vivian King. We have a full table tonight. We're going to talk about misdemeanor cases today, something where the stakes are not that high, but they are important to you if you get in trouble with a misdemeanor case. I have two lawyers in the house tonight, and I have a young man who's married with two children and his mother, and we're just going to talk about their experience in the criminal justice system. Please weigh in and call in and give us your opinion. We have in the studio, I will start with the lawyers because when I get to our civilians, we're going to stay on them for a while. So I'm going to start off with Tina Watson. She's my good friend, former prosecutor in Fort Bend County, the go-to girl in Fort Bend County. She's been a defense lawyer for a very long time, and she'll be here to weigh in and help answer questions about domestic violence and other misdemeanor cases. I also have a new great lawyer named Justin Harris. He volunteered to come in tonight to answer questions. He's handled domestic violence cases in Harris County and around, and we'll talk to him. Then I have Miss Lorenza McCaskill. She is a concerned mother. When her son got in trouble, she called me for advice, but by the grace of God, she didn't really need me. But it all worked out, but she still volunteered to come tell her story. And then we have Dominique Lane. Dominique is shy and bashful, and I'm sure his mom drug him here to tell his story so that hopefully people in the community can learn about what happens in our Harris County Criminal Courthouse, what we can do to make our community better, and to understand our laws a little bit better because they do apply to all courts in Texas. Remember, our Texas legislature makes the laws. They change them every 2 years. They're very difficult to keep up with. And we're going to talk about how domestic violence misdemeanor cases can affect you now and in the future. So we're going to take, our normal format is to take the first 5 minutes to kind of tell your story. So even though you're embarrassed, Neek, you're going to still tell us your story. So tell us what happened. How old are you? Did you graduate from high school? Are you married? Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
I'm 25, been married 4 years, about to be 5 years on Valentine's Day.
Oh, okay, Valentine's Day. So you're a romantic.
I was smart.
One gift for two.
I have two kids, a 4-year-old little girl and a 2-year-old little boy. I went to Westside High School. Honorably discharged from the military U.S. Army, 92 Alpha, supply logistics specialist. And I guess we want to talk about the first case?
Yeah, let's talk about, he's had 2 misdemeanor cases. Your first case was domestic violence, and I know you're young, getting married, so young people argue and fight. I'd hate to be 20 again. I got married the first time at 22. I think it was only physical once. And then, and had relationships, and so it is pretty volatile when you're young because you don't know how to handle your emotions. So I'm going to start out by saying we should not fuss and fight, but it does happen. So does that make you feel a little more comfortable telling us what's happened? Okay.
I don't mind, but we was arguing about money, me and my wife, and I was drunk.
Okay.
And I lost my patience, and I put my hands on her. You know, she left the house, and I got into an argument with the neighbor. Then they called the police.
So the neighbor called the police?
The neighbor called the police, and they told them I had came outside with a gun. So that's why the SWAT team came.
SWAT came, wow. Did you come outside with a gun?
No, ma'am. Okay. That's why I didn't get charged with it. Because all my firearms were still in the safe.
Okay.
And locked.
So you let the police, when they got there, look at your firearms?
Right. I mean, I came out with my hands up, so.
With SWAT, up with your hands up, okay.
So they would just went in there, search. They didn't find nothing, no drugs, no nothing. Just my firearms, and they put them all back in the safe. And I was charged with domestic violence 3 days after my 25th birthday.
Oh, I'm sorry. And so you know, you hired a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
And tell
Yes,
us
ma'am.
about that. How did you select a lawyer?
My mom selected the lawyer.
Okay, Mom, come on in here. You always involved, huh?
Yes,
Even
ma'am.
though it's your 25-year-old baby, you still got involved. Tell me why you got involved with his case.
Well, I got involved because I know that he needed some type of support, and like you said, young, you know, especially when we're young, we do make bad decisions. I won't say mistakes; it's decisions that we make in life. And as a mother, I need to support my son, so I did. I was in court the first time, and he. You know, sometimes kids don't want to listen to you because they think they know it all. And he was like, I could defend, you know, myself. And I'm like, no. You know, because I used to be in the criminal justice. I mean, I was a police officer for 4.5 years.
Oh, okay, wow.
So I know he could not, you know, defend himself. So, and while I was in the courthouse, I met Mr. George Tennant.
Okay.
And that's how I got to know Mr. George, and I asked him to represent my son, and he did. So
Okay.
he did a great job.
And George is a nice guy. He's a
He
friend of the
is.
show. So if you
Yeah.
go on my YouTube
Okay.
page, he has won a sexual assault case and brought his clients on, and it's on my YouTube channel. So he's a good young lawyer. He does call me when he has problems, and I do try to help him like I do everybody, and like Tina does. We help all the young lawyers, but he's a very good lawyer. So you did have a good young lawyer.
Yeah,
And he's
he
not
was really good.
young in terms of age because he had a
Right.
career before. I think he was a social worker.
Okay. And that's how it went. And he represented him very well. And what hurt, you know, as a mother, I knew I had to be there for my son because everyone was like, you know, he's grown, let him be, but who's going to support him? He needs support. And we can't let our kids just drift off. We actually have to teach them, show them.
Right.
So as a mother, with the love I have, that's what he needed at that point, to go straight.
Now, is his dad in his life?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. He never had his father in his life, unfortunately. But as a mother, single mother, I try my best to raise my
Well,
son.
you've done a good job.
Thank you. And prior
Okay.
to the domestic violence, he have never, not even got a traffic ticket before. Never been in trouble at school or anything like that. Of course, you know, they jump, you know, fight him, you know, for various reasons. But however, nothing else.
They filed him.
Yeah, yeah.
he's little?
Yeah, they used to beat on my son.
Cute though. You don't take no beatings on TV. You didn't get beat.
But
From the mother's standpoint, you got beat.
Right.
So if somebody fights my daughter, I would say they were beating up on her too, even though she might have won.
right. And that's what it,
Don't
you
be
know,
nervous.
Right.
Don't worry about it. That's just your mother's perspective.
Right, and then my family was, you know, against it. You know, it's like, let him be. You know, he had to learn why we all made bad decisions. We just didn't get caught
Right.
with our bad decision.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and I looked at my time when I was his age, the things I have made, you know, the bad decision I
Right.
made. But however, by the grace of God, I wasn't incarcerated because I could have.
Right.
Right, and I had the love and support from my mother at that time, you know, trying to, you know, get me right on the right path. So that was my job, my duty to do that with my son.
Let me ask you, as a mother, though, knowing that your son did the right thing by obviously marrying a lady he was, you know, probably having sex with when he was young. A lot of young kids don't even get married anymore, so I appreciate that. So he's married, have emotions he can't handle. How did you feel towards the girl? Because a lot of mothers of sons are like hate their daughter-in-laws. I mean, did you go and talk to her and try to, you know, like kind of counsel the two of them, or did you just take his side?
No, I did not. As a mother, I was also abused. So that wasn't a factor. My son, whether he was my son, whether he was my husband, it was wrong.
Okay.
As a woman, and I talked to her woman to woman, you don't have to tolerate it. You don't have to stay there. You know, you can leave. You know, and I did not tell her to leave, you know, like divorce him, because that's not my job to do. But however, you don't have to take that disrespect, because that's not love. He can't love you if he hurt you. And I did tell her that, because that's to any woman, any young woman out there, I would tell them that.
All right. Well, let me let one of the lawyers weigh in. Justin, Mr. Harris, tell us, have you had any cases as a lawyer with domestic violence, and how do you approach them?
I have. I've had several. I start out the case looking at what evidence the state has and talking to my client about what happened. And then I kind of branch out from there as far as witnesses. I think it's important to, and it can be a sensitive thing to do, because I agree with you as far as the way we're supposed to treat people we love. And, but we'll reach out to the victim or the complainant in the case and talk to them and see what happens. And what I've found in maybe every one of the domestic violence cases, felony or misdemeanor, is that nothing's black and white. There's always shades of gray in between. And I find my job is not to necessarily find those, but to make sure I can convey those either to the prosecutor or to a jury or a judge.
Okay.
And that's kind of my approach to them. I just kind of take it and run with it and flesh out everything that I can.
Well, that's what you expect a good lawyer to do. Is that what Mr. Tennant did in your case?
Yes, he did. He was great.
Now, how do you feel about a lawyer that says, okay, I've investigated it, as Mr. Harris would do, as we would do, and as your lawyer did, and says, but I think you need to take deferred adjudication. How did you feel about that?
Well, my son did wrong, and
Okay.
he had to pay for what he did.
Okay. So that's the bottom line. Okay, that's good. You have a good attitude about it. Okay, Miss Tina, let's you weigh in on your approach and your thoughts about what we've talked about. And have you noticed that a lot of times alcohol plays a role in domestic violence?
Definitely.
That's what I find. Alcohol and
Definitely.
drugs usually.
Definitely, that is a factor. And what's interesting to me is many times I would get a prosecutor who really don't pick up on that very important fact that I think if a prosecutor's job is to do justice and to make sure that this doesn't happen again, one of the things I would do as a prosecutor is see if alcohol is a factor, then try to get treatment or so on. Many times they only want the conviction, and when I say only want, the conviction is huge, and they are not looking at other steps to try to prevent something like this from happening again. Many times there are shades of gray. Sometimes there's motive in these cases, in that someone will exaggerate what happened or may even have a motive for purposes of a divorce or custody proceeding. And so you have to go behind just the facts and just what happened and see if there's some other motives involved as well. But yes, alcohol is usually a factor, and one that I believe prosecutors miss out on trying to help put together a family. What I've done actually as a criminal defense attorney is recognizing that if that's a problem, I have asked my client to get help, and I have suggested to my client to get help, just because that's part of my job, to make sure we don't get into these problems again. And so I have done that.
And so have I. And that's why I brought that up about the alcohol. I try to find out what's the underlying problem. You know, was he abused as a kid himself, so he doesn't know how to deal with a negative situation in the household? Because I notice a lot of black men don't know how to deal with the anxiety of trying to be men, especially if they didn't have an example of a man. And so a lot of times, although I'm not a man, and I can't tell a man how to be a man, I do try to take them aside and tell them that there is no definition for being a man. It's nothing wrong with hurting. It's nothing wrong with crying for your family. And it's nothing wrong with talking and experimenting with things to think of a better way to do it. Just don't do it like the street. You just hit somebody.
Right.
You know, I don't know the right way, and I can't tell you how to feel, but I'm telling you to explore your feelings. And try to just step away from the situation for a moment, you know, step back away from the situation for a moment. And sometimes to be the man of the household means to absorb the pain of the household and not attack. You know, a lot of black guys think that I'm hurt, I hit you. I'm hurt, I attack. To control you, I hurt you. But sometimes the person at the top can actually be the one taking the most pain, and especially when you think of our Christian walks, right? Because we think of God, Jesus, whoever your God is long suffering. So you can suffer for your family. And so I try to just throw that real opposite approach to them so that they can kind of like explore absorbing the pain for your family, something you've never seen before, but it is real because that's what the women do. And I'm not trying to compare our pain with your pain. You know, I don't want to get into that because it's not a competition. But sometimes the reason why we're seen as strong is because we're actually absorbing a lot of pain for our family. So try doing that. And I've done that with a lot of the young men, and they've told me they would. Next time it happens, just take the pain. Be the man and take the pain.
Right.
Walk away and take the pain. And you will find that you will get so much respect in your household after, you know, it might take a couple of years for her to catch up, you know, to what you're doing. But if you create a pattern, you know, like when that trigger happens, you know, she says that crazy stuff that makes you go off, you have to learn how to walk away. And women, a lot of women can't take that. I mean, you'll get more respect from just walking away or just absorbing the pain. You'll find that you will get a lot more respect than you expect.
Yeah.
So that's just my 2 cents thrown into it. So let's talk about some of. So you were almost finished with this probation. It looks like you got the first case happened May 23rd of 2012, and it looks like you got the probation in September. So that's like 5 months later. So you had enough time to think about it. You got 1 year, so it was supposed to be to September of 2013. But in the middle, in July, you get another case for damaging your your mother-in-law's door. Now you're already on probation. You're not supposed to get in trouble anymore. How did this happen?
My wife, her dad picked her up from work early, dropped her off to my job because she needed to get off early. I didn't have a phone at the time, so she called her dad to pick her up. He take her to the job. I don't know specifically what we got into it for, but he said something. I couldn't hold my tongue. I couldn't tame my tongue, and I said something back, and so we was going at it. He went straight to police station. We didn't even get into any physical altercation. We went straight to police station. The police was turning him around. By the time the police was turning him around, I had went to my mother-in-law's house to pick up my kids, since that's the whole purpose of my wife coming to my job in the first place. So when I get there, I knock on the door. Nobody answer. I ring the doorbell. Nobody answer. But I had the keys to the house, front door, side door, back door, because I go there on a daily basis. So I opened the door. They had the keychain lock on it. And I'm saying Miss Daisy, my mother-in-law's name. No one's answering. Then I hear my little girl say, "Daddy, Daddy." But I'm trying to look to see where she's at. So I stuck my head kind of through the little keychain, the space between the door and the keychain. And then I kind of got a little frustrated, so I gave it a little bump. And it broke the frame. And so I went in, kept calling Miss Daisy's name, because she's kind of elderly, so she could have been passed out. I wasn't thinking she heard that me and my father-in-law already got into it. And then when I got to the hallway, she was like, "Chloe not here, the baby's not here, your wife picked him up." I knew she was lying, so I proceeded to leave, but I waited for 5 to 10 minutes trying to get her to come so she could look at the door. Cause I was like, this do not look good.
Yeah, you busted the door, the frame.
And so then I went back to work. Then the next day, fessed her up. I was still upset about what happened to me and my father-in-law. I went back, knocked on. I didn't knock down the door, but I was banging on the door, and the police came.
And so now you're on probation for domestic violence, and now you have another quasi-violent case where you are damaging a door frame, which is criminal mischief, which is doing damage to property that doesn't belong to you. And the level of offense depends on the amount of damage. So it's a Class B misdemeanor if it's under a certain amount. Class A, it could be a felony depending on the amount of damage. So I would assume that this would be a Class B misdemeanor.
I think it was like $50 to $300.
Right, that's Class B. And so now you've gotten arrested again. Now when you're on probation and you get arrested, you are not entitled to a bond until, well, you're entitled to a bond, but they're going to file a motion to revoke your adjudicate your guilt, basically, because when you get on deferred adjudication, you're not adjudicated guilty yet. So now you can be held about 10 days for them to file those charges, and now you have to answer to 2 cases now. So that's what happened to you. So now you got yourself in even more trouble.
Yes, ma'am.
So how are you feeling now after you do that?
I mean, it was a learning. Sometimes you got to get away from everything, and I was in jail for 21 days.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
And I got to grow. But a lot of people, you see a lot of older men in there with wives, and then even speaking of the officer that arrested me, he gave me a lot of knowledge,
Well, that's
And-
good.
and-
That's good. We don't hear that too often on here.
I mean,
Share that
he did,
with us, please.
He did more than what really he had to do, because when he came,
Now, this is the second officer that arrested
Yes.
you for
this is for the
damaging
criminal
door.
mischief. Because when he came out, my father-in-law told him I had a gun on me, which I didn't, and so he came out with his gun drawn, and the whole time in the court, he was like, I
Damn,
was
you've had a lot of guns drawn on you.
Army guy.
Okay.
But and then when we got in the car, and he was driving through, we was driving to the downtown, and we just started talking, and he said, sometimes you gotta focus on yourself, and then once you focus on yourself and you be happy with yourself, then you can make her happy. If you're so focused about making her happy, you're never gonna make yourself happy. Make yourself happy first, and she'll see it. And we had I mean, it was like a 30-minute ride.
Wow, wow.
It was
So
like
it wasn't, about how old was the police officer that
That
gave
was
you
I mean,
that
he said he'd
advice?
been in the force about like 15 years. He looked young. It looked like he was 30, so I could only guess he's about 38.
About
Maybe.
38, but
Maybe.
he had a baby face like you. 'Cause you look
He looked
young.
younger.
But you look 18. Okay, you talking about you're 25, 26.
But
Okay.
he gave me. I mean, it was a nice ride. We even joked, we laughed. You know, he said, you know, you seem like you're a good guy. I said, I don't take nothing personal though, because y'all know you're just doing your job. I did knock down the door. I can't get mad at you. And then he said, that's how you need to handle your wife. Don't take nothing personal. You know how ladies can be.
Yes, I know
And,
how we can be. I'm
but-
still like that.
But yeah, he, you know, and I think if the other officer would have arrested me, his partner, I probably went in jail with such a humble mind, knowing, because I wouldn't be able to find that root, that cornerstone where I need to start. He gave me basically my cornerstone where I need to start.
So he kind of
Myself.
fathered you a little bit. He kind of mentored you a little bit.
I mean, he did the Lord's will, whatever. He has.
But you accepted it too, so that's good that you received it.
That's right.
I mean, it was because he respected me, so it was why should I respect him?
Right.
He could have, disrespected me, y'all. You dumb.
do.
Yeah. He didn't.
That's great.
Did it
That's
surprise you?
important.
It did. It did.
Surprised
Because
you?
I seen other police officers, like I've never really been in trouble until I was 25, and even when I got arrested the first time, it was a bunch of officers, but none of them was rude. So, but it's 50 of them.
Right.
SWAT. It was SWAT.
But as far as like my life growing up, you see officers when they arrest somebody when they're guilty, when they catch them with whatever they catch them with, they're very rude. I done seen police officers walk inside people's house and say, "What you gonna do?"
Right.
What you gonna do? So, I mean, just the fact that I was red-handed and he still gave me respect. Then he still gave me knowledge. He did more than what he had to do. So that's the credit I could give to him.
Yeah, it's good.
That is something that almost needs to be
Say it loud. But let's take a call.
taught in the classes.
Yeah, that is.
in
that
the
is
police
great.
academy
That is
classes.
great. He was young, a young officer, obviously married.
Yes, ma'am.
Obviously he was married, but he took the time to actually talk to you. So do you remember his name?
I don't remember the name.
Because we might need to write a letter of commendation for him because we're always dogging cops. Maybe we need to write something positive. Maybe we need to write something positive for him because
Right.
it sounds like he could help some of his other fellow officers if he,
Yeah.
sees something like that. Let's take a phone call. Let's take a phone call. Do we have a phone call? Well, caller, you're on. You want to ask the question?
You can't hear me?
We
Hello?
don't hear anything.
Okay, well, I'll call back. I ain't gonna call back.
Nope, we don't.
Okay.
All right.
Now we do. Caller, you're on. We couldn't hear you. Go ahead. Hello? Okay, we lost you. Call back. All right, so.
Well, but that brings up a good point, Ms. King. I think we should give him some recognition. I mean, what we could do is if that office report is still around, we can find out who that officer is. And that's something that you and I were talking about earlier today, and that is the importance of the police officer's action and how they are the foot soldiers. They are the front line of the criminal justice system. And they can either make a case and result with someone like you who had a favorable experience that's a turnaround, or they can break a case, and that is by their behavior and shooting and harming someone and disrespecting them. So that's awesome. That's great. That's very good.
That is good. Now, let's talk to Mom again. Now, Mom, you had an issue with
Okay.
the way some of the calls you were getting from the DA. So he had a court-appointed lawyer the second time around.
That is correct.
And tell us about what your experience was with the DA's office.
Well, when I went to court with my son, to meet my son, I was sitting right in the front, of course, and I was there real early. I'm talking about, I think, because as a mother, I wanted to make sure, because I was just waiting to give you a call to make sure. But while I was sitting there, they was like, Mr. David, which was Dominique's attorney, he was trying his best, and I was telling him what Dominique's wife was talking about, that was incorrect information, that was not correct at all. They're making up these stories, why she was really upset about it, and I told him. So he let me read the report, and I was like, wow. You know,
What shocked you about the police report?
what shocked me about the police report is about him still beating on his wife after she told me that was not true, because we had a heart-to-heart talk. And also about him beating on his kids. Not the kids, maybe the wife, but the kids, no, I can't see it. I mean, you never, you can't predict what kids will do. You never know. But she already said to me that please, she begged me, she pleaded with me, please help me, because this is not correct. So what they did, what Mr. David did, he asked me to call her, and I did. And he said he called her as well.
Called the wife or
The
the
wife.
DA?
The
Okay.
wife. Mr. David called the wife, and guess what happened? Mr.
What?
David asked the wife to call the DA, and they spoke to one of the DA. So she came out, and I'm listening, looking at them and listening to them, and the other, they had two of them. And
Two DAs?
Two DAs, and one of them was so mean. We're going to have to take care of all this on Monday. This is, you know, no. Everything was no. It's a felony. And she was just going on, and I'm like, my heart was just broken. I'm like, wow.
How did you feel?
I felt really hurt, not because, I mean, because it was, to me, to be honest with you, I felt because he was a black young man. It was just like another one. Oh, just put him in the cave, you know, he's nothing. And
What
that
do you-
really hurted me.
What do you
That
think
really
would help in situations like that? Were there any black prosecutors in the court?
No, there was not
Do you think
one.
that sometimes people think that that will help if you have more black prosecutors? I don't have an opinion at all at this point, because some black prosecutors act worse than the other prosecutors.
Right,
So
right.
I don't really know, but I'm just thinking, why did you think race? It just seemed like
It's
she was.
just the way she approached, the way she was talking, to Mr. David and the other prosecutor, because the other one was fine. She was fine with it. She was like, okay, that's fine. And I think she was Hispanic. But the Caucasian young lady, when I tell you, I have never, it's like a demon was inside of her.
The thing that's always scary about the prosecutors is that they have a lot of power. So if we
Right.
don't have prosecutors that are sensitive to issues and to this community, we run into problems because, you know, the divide is so high. It's almost like some of the prosecutors are like dealing with the 1% of rich people in the country, and then there's the rest of us.
Right.
You know, and you know, TV portrays, you know, lawyers and cops as adversaries sometimes, like fussing at each other and stuff, when the experience we have is totally different.
Sure.
They're all on each other's side. They're all supporting each other, whether it's wrong or right. I mean, it doesn't matter. And so the experience is us, all of the police and law enforcement, against you, the little man.
Right.
And so, and people don't realize that we all have to still be in this community together. And so we need to try to make the best of these bad situations and not, and they don't realize that they talk to us like that. You know, I'm a
sure.
54-year-old woman, and it'll be
Oh,
a
sure.
25-year-old prosecutor talking to me like I'm the defendant. And
Oh,
first
sure.
of all, I'm not. And first of all, you should respect me. And first of all, you don't know what the hell happened. You weren't there.
Right.
So you don't know what happened. But I try to stay calm and cool about it, because fighting is just me being immature with them, and I don't do that. But you don't realize how adversarial this process is. It's a very mean-spirited process.
It is.
And that's one of the reasons why I started the show, is because so people can vent and we can understand, and maybe prosecutors will realize you can do your job without being mean and ugly and racist or classist. You know, it's painful. How do you feel about that, Justin?
I think that's absolutely right. I think you have a lot of what you said gave me several ideas. But I think you have the kind of talking more about the buddy-buddy relationship. Maybe that's not even the right way to put it, but they treat each other as colleagues, and
Right.
as they see themselves as on a team.
Right.
And what that gets you is a couple things, one of which is covering for each other.
Right.
You have young, less experienced prosecutors who don't recognize a bad search when they see one or
Right.
something, and they want to do whatever they can to change the facts to cover and protect their cop.
Right.
And that's where you start to have problems. That's one area where you start to have problems.
That's a real important point, and they don't realize that creates bad law, and that's not their job. I mean, prosecutors take an oath not to convict, but to see that justice is done.
Right.
And it's justice, and the rest of the community expects that. And what's painful, I think, is to watch prosecutors do what you just said. Teach a police officer how to lie. That's not even lying.
Exactly.
You know, teach them how to cover for themselves. And that's where we need to realize our politicians, we have to be accountable. We need to make sure our, and I say this every week, we need to make sure our city council elections are going on, mayor elections. Understand that the mayor appoints the police chief. Okay, so when you're going to a forum where there's the mayor, you need to ask her, are you going to have police officers that are trained and that are treat blacks and whites the same?
Right.
Okay, because that's all black people want, or Hispanic people, or poor people want, is
Right.
to be treated the same. Not to, if we're wrong, we're wrong, but treat everybody the same.
Right.
We understand that being a police officer is a dangerous job. I mean, I have a lot of police officers, but you don't also just kick a man when he's down either.
Right.
That's not having to do anything with danger. As we saw in the Chad Holly case, they weren't scared at that point. They're just taking advantage of the situation.
Sure,
Right.
sure. Sensitivity training, that's just so important. And it appears either that officer that spoke to you had it, or just innately was that type of person, that type of human being that could relate. And many times that is the difference. And when a prosecutor is dismissive, and that's what you heard, she didn't want to hear, she didn't want to listen, she was dismissive.
She didn't.
It's sad because she stops thinking and she draws a conclusion, and that's the end of it. And as you said, they have a lot of power.
Right.
And it leaves you feeling very powerless, very vulnerable, because she's not listening anymore.
Right.
But many of them, don't have a lot of life experiences.
And that's another thing Tina and I have talked about. Like you said, they're usually on their first marriage, first serious relationship. So in their minds, everything is roses. I can't imagine anything bad happening. When you start dealing with prosecutors that are 35, 40,
Right.
maybe been divorced or maybe gone through some tragedy.
Sure.
Whether it's a parent dying or, a child not coming out the way it was supposed to,
Sure.
or a child getting in trouble, then they start getting life's experiences. And it's
That's
unfortunate
right.
there's not more mature or older prosecutors, because they can relate usually.
Right.
Sure.
Usually.
That's exactly right.
Don't you find that,
Oh,
Tina?
definitely. And if that prosecutor hadn't been in a relationship where money was a factor,
Right.
or attention and children,
So a
and
lot of
young,
prosecutors are wealthy.
and
I mean,
so on,
independently wealthy.
then they don't understand, and
They come from money, so the job doesn't really matter. You know what I mean?
Right.
They have
Right.
money, so they don't understand how you can get drunk on a Friday, the bills are not all lining up together, and someone smarts off and a trigger goes on, a trigger that you don't even know you have, that goes off. Now you have to be ready for it in the future. But
Sure.
and that's why for many years you couldn't even testify against your spouse. There was
That's
spousal
right.
privileges, but that's been gone for 15 years, if
That's
not
right.
longer.
That's right.
There was not a lot of domestic violence, because if she asserted her privilege, she didn't have to talk against you. And the courts understood, and it made sense that the sanctity of the relationship is more important than the law. And that was the public policy behind that. But of course, everything has changed, and now the government knows more about what should happen to your business than you do. I see we have another call. Let's try our new system again. You see, we have no phone in here, so we're working with new technology. Caller, you're on.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This question is for Dom. In listening to his testimony, what he endured, I want to
That's
know
your wife? Oh,
what testimony. No, Mr. Lane.
Dominique.
she said Dom.
That's what
Yeah,
people
I
Dom,
know.
Dominique.
Okay,
Yeah. Go ahead.
sorry.
If this were to take place with another young man, the same scenario, what advice or what testimony would he give this young man who's endured this same situation?
Okay, so I think the question they're asking you, I believe, Dominique, is, since you've been through this, how would you advise someone else that's going through some domestic violence or potential for domestic violence in their relationship?
Don't do evil, do better.
Did you hear him? Don't do evil, do better. He's a man of few words.
Yes, I know this. What if the situation were more drastic than what it was? I mean, because anything could have happened in that situation. A more drastic situation went down.
I don't.
My one, the trauma of the normal birth. If that was the case, what testimony would he offer? What advice would he offer this young man? because law enforcement is corrupt everywhere. It's not considered in Texas, Louisiana, California, everywhere. What advice, what testimony would you offer a young black man struggling to have his heart hurt?
Can you answer that, Dominique?
Okay, you talking about before or after?
After.
After. You just got to work on yourself. You just gonna have to work on yourself. Be humble.
Dominique gave a good testimony. He said the cop talked to him and it humbled him, and he had 21 days in jail to think about that, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to say what somebody else needs to do, in that, because you don't know what their mindset is. You got to really be there. You got to just give the right words.
Spiritual advice.
Spiritual.
What type of spiritual advice did you give that young man?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Find Christ.
Like he did.
Yeah.
Seek.
Well, thank you for calling. We appreciate you calling and listening.
Thank you. I love the show.
Thank you so much. All righty. Let's start with Tina. We'll let the lawyers talk for a few minutes. Tina, let's talk about the consequences of a domestic violence misdemeanor, such as the one, even though it was deferred adjudication,
Correct.
such as the one that Dominique had.
Right. What we have to counsel clients now on is there are what we call collateral consequences to certain offenses. And what has happened is certain offenses that are considered crimes of moral turpitude have an extra layer of consequence than just going to jail and just the penal system. So domestic violence assault, a family violence assault, is considered a crime of moral turpitude. Theft is also considered a crime of moral turpitude, and prostitution. I think the code defined these offenses as so kind of morally depraved, they're kind of deceitful of that nature, that they should have an extra layer of consequence. So if this was an assault between two males that were unrelated, not family violence, just regular assault, there's not much of a collateral or another consequence besides your jail time, your deferred. There are some apartment complexes and leasing agencies that feel that assaultive conduct is a liability because it shows that you have a violent propensity, and you may have an issue with being able to lease and live in certain housing and certain apartment complexes. And that's with any assault, even a Class C assault. However, when it gets to family violence, it becomes an offense of moral turpitude, and it has a higher level of a consequence when it comes to leasing, apartment complexes, and even some jobs.
Let's stop right here and take a question. We have another caller. Caller, you're on. Thank you for calling Truth and Justice with Vivian King.
Good evening, Mr. King.
Good evening.
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you, first of all, for your show that you're doing this to bring into light what is happening in the criminal justice system that many of us don't know about, but we appreciate people like you, first of all. I'd like to say that.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I got a question for you. I'm curious to know, as a criminal defense attorney, what process do you use in choosing to defend a person that comes to you for criminal defense? What process? How do you go about it? Let's say money's not an issue. What process do you use?
Okay, well, money is usually the issue, but money's usually the issue.
No. What I'm saying is,
I know. I know.
They have the finance in it.
Yeah. I don't like representing people now that I've gotten older that are unreasonable, or that are addicts, drug addicts, wet addicts, because they don't think logically, and they don't remember what you tell them. But I still will defend them. One of the things you'll find about real criminal defense lawyer is we believe in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments of the federal Constitution and the state constitutions that mirror those laws. We believe everybody is entitled to a defense. We want clients who respect us. If I have a client, and I've had young crazy clients cuss me out or, call me a bitch or, or whatever. I used to have another lawyer, female lawyer I used to work with. We did a lot of court appointments back in the 90s and 2000s, and by November I would say, okay, this is the last black bitch I'm gonna be called this year. It's November 1st, no more black bitches this year, okay? So I ain't dealing with these dudes no more till January. I've been called. So what you find a lot is the poorest of people who are in the most trouble will cuss you out. And I ain't getting cussed out for crack, like under a gram, you know, which is a gram is like a sweet and low pack. Now, if they got a kilo, you can cuss me out because you're going to jail for a long time. If you kill somebody, I'll take a cussing out. You can call me a black bitch. You mad. You can't fuss at anybody else. You can't cuss at the prosecutors. But I don't like disrespectful clients. So those are really the only ones. I mean, you can do anything, but remember, 90% of what criminal defense lawyers do is make the punishment fit the crime. Because a lot of times people are guilty, just like Dominique Lane was guilty. So his lawyer, both lawyers, made the punishments fit the crime, okay? So that's what we do mostly. I mean, if say two boys do a robbery and one gets 50 years and the other one gets probation, then the lawyer's job is to try to figure out, you know, make the punishment fit the crime. You don't want a kid to get 50 years when somebody else is getting 5 years. So that's most of what we do is investigate and make sure that the range of punishment is appropriate. Now, if the cops got it wrong, sometimes the cops have the wrong charges. They've overcharged or undercharged, so things need to be reduced. And then there's those 10% of cases where people are just not guilty. I mean, it's just flat out wrong and we need to go to trial. That's 10% of all the cases filed. Unfortunately, it's about 90% of the cases that I get hired on, they're not guilty. So one of my fortes is to represent people who want a trial. So it's the attitude of the client, really. I hope that answers your question, caller. And I think they've hung him up. Okay, so Tina, let's talk about another collateral consequence. Let's talk about, let me.
I wanted to finish up on that one. So the difference in the assault and in the DV assault. Two men, that's just a regular
Don't use nicknames on my client, my people, you know, domestic violence.
Domestic violence, I apologize. Is this, you can get what is called a petition for non-disclosure, which means you can get your record partially sealed if it's a regular assault. But if it's a family violence, domestic violence assault, you are prohibited. You cannot get that partially non-disclosed. That means, as the law stands today, that offense will be on your record forever for everyone to see. Now, we say as the law stands today because, as you so appropriately mentioned, the legislature meets every 2 years, and hopefully they'll do something about that, and hopefully, you know, it will change. But as it stands today, that is a huge difference between a regular assault, same sex, not family violence, and a family violence, domestic violence assault. One can get partially non-disclosed or partially sealed. The other one cannot. It stays forever.
And let me see if Justin wants to speak to the second domestic violence case. So if you've gotten one that's a misdemeanor, and then say, for example, they go home tonight and his wife watched it and said, "You were smiling too much at Miss King. I think you like that old lady." And she hits him upside his head and he hits her back and she calls the police. Where is he going to be charged? It's no gun, no knife, just a little slap. Is he going to be in misdemeanor court again, or is he going to be in felony court?
He will be in district felony court.
Yes, let's talk
Felony
about
district
that.
court. A second conviction when there's been a previous finding of affirmative violence.
Yes.
Carries a second charge, not even a conviction, becomes a felony, a third-degree felony in Texas. So
And now you're facing what range of punishment?
between 2 years and 10 years in prison, and up to a $10,000 fine.
So what does that mean to you, Dominique? You gotta walk away.
And the important thing is, it's not just if it's the same person. And it doesn't. A family member in Texas law can include a roommate.
It could be your mother.
I mean, obviously that's a family member, but I have people who call me and they say, "My roommate, I got into it, and I'm charged with family violence." So they're not, you know, our relationship's not like that. And so that's the thing to keep in mind is, and this is the frustrating thing with the law, is you have a long life ahead of you and a very bright life, but you now have a lot at stake, because if someone you've seen, it just kind of takes an allegation that's maybe not much behind it, and you're going to jail, and you're having to post a bond on a felony, and you're having to hire an attorney on a felony.
Everything's higher.
And,
It's going to be at least a $10,000 bond next time. It's going to be a higher fee because when it's 2 to 10, you know, you're going to have to get into a higher paid lawyers, or lawyers that are more experienced that can take a case to trial because it might not be deferred this time. You might really have to fight it, or the charges might not be right, but it doesn't matter who it is. And so that's why you need to understand that if they're considered a family member, which is a broad definition under the law. Let's talk about the fact that he can't. Who wants to address the fact that he can't possess a firearm for 5 years? I think. Or do y'all want to talk about that? There are some gun restrictions that when he got on deferred adjudication, he was given by his probation officer. And let's see if Dominique remembers that.
I remember when I was in court, in Judge Stanley Court, when I signed my probation paper, said you weren't allowed to have firearms in your possession or in your home.
Right.
Okay. All right. And see, that's different from most misdemeanors. Most misdemeanors, you can even get your concealed handgun license 5 years after the misdemeanors are over. But there are stricter laws when it's domestic violence.
My understanding is federal. It comes from the federal, I'm probably going to miss the acronym, but the Federal Battered Wives Act that Congress passed. So it's across the board. Federal means the entire United States. If a state wants to get the monies, they have to adopt it. And so, of course, Texas is one of those states that did. And you are prohibited for a period of time. I think it is 5 years.
It's 5 years.
Don't have the statute in front of me. Dangerous to quote something.
And let me
without
tell you
a
why it's
statute.
important. Tina's saying something important, and the reason why, even though we're experts at what we do, the statute, our legislators just met, so they are changing the law as we speak. And so it just changes constantly.
Sure.
And crimes that the legislature loves to tweak so they can go back and tell their constituents they tweaked were domestic violence,
That's right.
drunk driving, you know, I mean, which one? Drugs, drug offenses. They love tweaking these laws. So every year, a lawyer, and remember, the new statutes haven't come out because when they meet, some laws take effect September 1st, some January 1st, some next September 1st. And so we have to keep constantly, and you know, they only publish books once a year. So we have to buy a new book every year, and several books, not just the penal code, but the code of criminal procedure. But then we have to constantly, you know, like if he got a case, with the lawyer not only has to do what everyone said, we have to actually pull the statute to make sure that there's no interim change from the 2013/14 book that we have, because things take effect at different times. And that's what's dangerous about hiring a general practitioner lawyer. That's what hurts a lot of people, because they just hire, oh, this was my personal injury lawyer, or this is my divorce lawyer, and they go hire them for a misdemeanor, I mean, or for a criminal case. They run in, say, oh, this is easy. They don't do any investigation. They take your money, and you're paying them as much as you'd pay me, which is wrong because I'm an expert and they're not. And then they'll make you take deferred adjudication, never tell you what the consequences are.
Correct.
You might not be guilty. And if you're not guilty because the consequences are so severe, you need to go to trial. I mean, on most of my domestic violence cases, they go to trial because the consequences are so severe. And but you know, sometimes they did it and you just can't get around it. But sometimes it's a mutual combat. Both of them are drunk on a Friday night. You know, and it's just whoever calls the police first. And when the police come, they can always arrest the man. But a lot of times, let me tell you what a lot of domestic violence cases are. You know how you young people are. These girls, your wives will look through your cell phones, and y'all have some pictures you shouldn't have. Or your steady girlfriend looks through it, and then she pops you upside your head, and you grab her, and it's on. She calls the police on you. You know, and so that a lot of times it's like that. So it happens in a lot of different ways, and so you really have to have a lawyer that's experienced with what they're doing to deal with it. We don't have much time. This hour without commercials goes really fast, and we have another caller. Caller, thank you for calling Truth and Justice for Vivian King.
Hey, how you doing, Ms. King?
Hey, Tracy Brown.
Yes, man, I want to tell you, Vivian, and other lady, y'all looking very beautiful tonight.
Y'all need to know that Tracy is my #1 fan.
Oh, okay.
#1 fan.
He's our no. He even started a Facebook page. Is that right, Tracy?
Yeah, I've done that.
I didn't even know him.
I know y'all have much time left with her.
No, we can take it all with you, Tracy.
Okay. Well, I want to tell you, young brother, I commend you, man, for doing what you did. And hey, I like to turn lives around. You know, good thing. You take care of your family. You're a good brother. You know, you did your time. You know, you didn't complain about it. You know, you stood up. You mad about it. And I want to say to the mother, you know, you're a good woman. You know, for standing behind it. You know, and give it to the process.
All right.
I want to say I appreciate the show, and yeah, I learned something every week.
You learned something this week, Tracy? As long you've been watching me, November is our 2-year anniversary, and you've been watching every week, and you still learning something, Tracy?
Well, look, I'm gonna tell you something I learned. Since I've been watching the show, you know what I learned?
What's that?
The one I didn't know.
Okay.
You know, a lot of changes. I thought you were saying love, but that's what I don't know.
All righty. Well, thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for watching. And we're working on our new sound system. You see, we don't have the phone, but the callers are coming in kind of bad, so we don't hear you that well. But thank you for calling, and please call us next week, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. So we wanted to talk. We talked about the rental property, renting is being a problem, and we've. What other consequences are there? Tina told you about the crimes of moral turpitude for misdemeanors. All felonies are crimes of moral turpitude, but it's only a few misdemeanors. Wow. And so that's one of it. I mean, domestic violence with a woman, you know, like a love partner, theft, prostitution, and anything that has to do with lying, kind of bribery type cases. How has that affected you? You're still young. Has this affected your job, getting jobs yet?
I've been, besides the little smoke shop I had worked at, I never been employed since my last job.
Yeah.
So it's affecting you. Do you think it's affecting your mom?
Yes, it is. It is. But he had, you know, the second chance when he went to jail the second time, I was trying to get him out. He said, "No, Mama, don't get me out." I think I told you that.
Right.
He didn't want me to get him out, and I prayed and I fasted, and he actually gave himself to Christ after he got out.
That's
wonderful.
great.
They've been working it together, and it's still a process. And he said, "You know what I learned that, Mama? You can't put your hands on women." You know, and I told him, I said, "I'm a woman. My mother was abused, so it shouldn't be."
Sure.
And he realized that. Sometimes you just have to go to that.
Sure.
Hate to see it,
Sure.
because that tore me apart. But you know,
Well,
hopefully he learned.
Young people like him definitely deserve a second chance.
Yes, they
and unfortunately, you know, the internet is out there for a lot of employers and people to see. But we're hoping, and I'm not sure how we can do it, that people can understand that just because you have a record or you have that you're a great person, a great employee, and get you a job that you deserve.
And one of the things we talk about every week, and keep this in mind, young people your age don't like to get involved with politics, but you need to vote and get involved because remember, you guys are the legislature of the future. I mean, you could go to Austin and say, hey, let something stay on somebody's record for 5 years, and then it's automatically expunged. I mean, the legislators created it. I mean, we the people created the laws with our few little representatives. And remember, a lot of those representatives have been there for 100 years. They've been there too long anyway. I mean, you know, especially in the minority community, they get there at 25. They're there until they die. It seems like no one runs against them. And those laws can be changed. I tell my young people all the time, you are the future. So stop not being involved in it because you could run against the person that's your state representative in your community. And young people if y'all united, you could take over. Marijuana doesn't have to be illegal. You know, in states where it's not illegal anymore, I think young people have taken over, or else the old dope smokers have. I mean, I don't know. I mean, somebody has. But I'm just saying, you are the future. So don't, you know, you can obviously still vote. Even people who've have felonies can vote in Texas. That's a lie that people say. You just can't be on probation or on parole. But the day you're off, you can vote.
Correct.
So y'all need to vote, be involved, and when you go to rallies, talk about things that are important. You know, you don't hear people asking legislators about the criminal justice system. You need to. You need to be asking politicians about what have you done to help young people get jobs because they've had a little blemish on their record. I mean, even with this Navy guy that's gone crazy, they're trying to go through things on his record, but people have records so easily. Now, when we were young, they let you get away with almost anything as long as you're not robbing somebody. They let kids be kids because they understood kids were going to be mischievous. Now, kids get arrested for everything. And now it's on the internet, so it makes it that much worse. So there have to be employers that hire people with records, and there are employers that do that. It's just that they have to know you and take a chance on you. You have to be honest about it. So we have about 4 minutes. My cameraman is telling me, so I am going to let everybody have a minute, unless you give your minute to someone else. And we're going to start off with you, Dominique. What have you learned from this experience?
What I learned from the experience, one thing I want to touch on, my mom said, everybody know wrong.
Right.
You just need to know not to do it.
Right.
So I always knew it was wrong to put my hands on a woman. I lost my cool one time. And what I always learned, like you say, I found Christ. I always knew his name, I always knew his words, but I wasn't obedient to his words.
You're growing
That's the
up.
difference.
That's maturity.
That's the difference.
You're on the road. You're on the right track to maturity.
That's the only difference.
It's being obedient. Well, okay, what do you want to say, Mom?
Wow, that's great.
Just want to tell everyone that, just because, like you said, someone, get off track is, as a parent, try to support you, try and seek and try to solve that issue. If he's angry, why is he angry? If he's on drugs, why are you on drugs? Get him some help, because as a mother, I think that's what we should do, help our young men and sister to stay focused and just give them the love and the help that they need, whatever it might be.
To grow up.
To grow up.
Right.
And that's it, and never give up on them. So that's what
What a
people
beautiful
wanted me to
message
do.
as a
I
mother. Isn't that a
know,
beautiful
I
message?
know.
Okay, what's your closing words,
Well,
Justin?
I want to kind of go back to a couple things that were said before.
Sure.
You said sensitivity training would be something that is good and helpful, and I think that it is, but I think that the experience that you had with your officer, the one who kind of gave you a little bit of a lecture, a little pep talk on the way to the jail, I don't think that's something he learned from sensitivity training. I think that's something he brought. And so I think it's very important to have good recruitment for our law enforcement.
That's right.
And Harris County has like 90 law enforcement agencies in it or something,
too many.
70 to 90. Everything from Jersey Village Police Department all the way up to HPD. I'm not saying anything bad about Jersey Village Police Department.
Please.
But I think recruitment's important. And then the other thing I'll say, Dominique, is, I don't know how you can take this, but what you've been through, you have a voice and a background and a face and a family that you can be a voice for other people too. And I tell people when they call me, and parents of people who are trying to find a job and they don't feel like something's fair the way the law works, I say, this may sound silly and I don't mean to be flippant, but call your legislator. Just call them. And also vote, but call them. And you have a voice that you can speak for other people who can't speak for themselves. So I encourage you to do that, just like Ms. King said.
All right, Tina.
Well, I have enjoyed meeting you, Dominique, and you are very encouraging. And I think that you should stay exactly who you are, because I think a lot of young people can relate to you as well as to your mom. I think it was wonderful that the actions you took were not divisive, but were one where the family could remain intact. You called your son out for doing wrong. You went to your daughter-in-law and told her how you felt, because you had also been abused. And it was a respect for the family unit, which is so important, because I think sometimes parents kind of get in there and divide things, and that's not going to solve anything for those two little kids you guys have.
Right.
And so the way you all acted in so many ways was so appropriate for what we see all the time as criminal defense attorneys, because it's not only, yes, we defend people who are charged with offenses, but we all try to hope to think we're making society a little better. And by doing that, keeping families together and keeping people stronger. And so that's exactly what happened here. I think you, your wife, your kids, y'all a stronger family. And it's because of everything y'all talked about. And that's awesome. That's good. Yeah.
Well, I'm being told to wrap this up, so thank you so much for watching. I think we've learned a lot tonight. Thank this family for sharing your personal experience and putting your business in the street and sharing, so that we can learn something from that. You hear from our callers that got through that they learned something tonight. We've all learned something from the experience. Remember, what we want to do is make Harris County a better community. It's huge, but I think we can work a little bit at a time to work together to understand our system, to work more in our system. So we'll bring you another great show next week. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King, and we're going to all try to get used to this new phone system. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
That was awesome.
Really good. Hot topic in the news this week. We've been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate Bye.